Hey there, everyone. So today I was just going to go through some of the developments that I have made over the past couple weeks as I have been working on my project. So the main area that I have been focusing in with my project is glitch.com, so developing my interactive site on glitch.com, because what this allows me to do is allows me to share code and commentary in real time with people, and people can go on and actually see what's happening. So today what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the glitch.com site and share with you all some of the things that I've been working on, how it's changed, and look at one of my in progress pages, which really is in a very new state. So what I'll do at the end is I'm going to go through and I'm going to do some live coding as I start to explore some of the visual stuff that I'm interested in. So basically what this website allows me to do is allows me to have all of my different files over on the left-hand side, including a README file, which I've used as a sort of place to create an artist statement. So my artist statement, as well as a guide to how to actually look through and parse the code, is here. And so in addition to the artist statement, which is up top, there are links to my work, explanations of the different pages. You can see, though, that even already in the past couple days here, I've generated more files. So the site guide is actually out of date. As the files grow and as the project grows, I'll have to be updating this over time. And then at the bottom, I also have links to theory and other inspirational texts that I'm working from, because I think it's, for me, a huge part of the work that I'm doing is text and looking at text and thinking about texts in relation to visual elements. As we can see on the other side here, where the live site is being previewed, the text forward sort of art making process is something that I have been consistently engaged and interested in, even when I'm thinking about making work across any sort of medium. Almost always text seems to creep in there. So the index file, which is like the main HTML file, one of the things I'm really interested in here is the way that as I go through and I change things, I can leave some of those artifacts in as comments so that people can come back later and see some of the different ways that the code has changed or could potentially change over time. So over here we could see that there's like the text that ends up coming here. So landmarks is here, and then it's over here. And there was a moment where, when I was writing, I had a line that said, after the "I'm plagued by a question," which we see over here. After that, there was a sentence, "when confronted by facial recognition." And after reading through and seeing it laid out on the page, I decided I didn't want that in there, but I still left it in here in the comments as a sort of artifact of that process of writing and the process of editing. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the format of code, is that there's this sort of duality or dual mode, wherein what's made visible through the actual code is one thing, but then there's this whole commenting section that allows for this sort of sub-narrative or other version of the work to come through. So I'm really interested in, by using this glitch.com site, like how can I give you all and any viewer in the future too the ability to both see things as I imagine them actually visually looking, and then also thinking about the sort of inside scoop or this other mode of thinking and working through the text. So I believe last time when I showed this, there was basically a white page with a singular video frame on it. So over the last 2 weeks, I've added more text, and I'm continually writing and considering what to add and subtract from this page, and it will change over time. Basically as a way to think about contextualizing the visual elements of the work. And then as you scroll down the page, we get back to that facial recognition underlying the same sort of way that I was working before. And then from here, I was thinking about what are some of the things that I can do with this that visually are going to be interesting. And so one of the things that I'm always kind of pressing up against is how much of the default way that a program visualizes do I want to modify, and how much do I want to actually work with that. So things like the cyan and the magenta, the cyan lines and the magenta dots, and the gray and white text of the actual facial recognition here, like that's all default from the program. And I could change that if I wanted to, but part of me is really interested in working with that to see how I can, possibly use what they consider the default visual style and work with and against that to make something visually interesting. And so as I'm starting to work on what maybe the next page or the next set of texts and images look like, I've started to think about the idea of the triptych. And so the second page here is the most recent page. So recent that you can see that the text here is just test on the top and test 2 on the bottom. And that's basically here as a way to allow me to basically know what's happening on the page. So when I'm coding in this fashion, I'm not necessarily coming in knowing exactly what I want the end goal to be and then executing that. I see this web page as sort of sketchbook where I'm able to add and subtract and change things over time. So what's happening here is that I've taken some of the processes that were happening on the page before and I've split them out so that they're getting repeated over time. And what I've done with the top is also added a blue filter that over time fades my image and leaves us only with the sort of floating data set by copying the same color that starts, that same blue color, and then having that slowly increase in opacity time over time over time, so that at the end there is no body showing, but rather just this floating number, this floating numerical thing. And so what I want to do for the live coding today is I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at how I might be able to do that with the other elements on the page too. So what that means is that basically I'm going to navigate over to my script for this page, which is script 2. And what this contains is basically the same as what it does for the first page, except now it's tripled. So where there was 1 video, there is now 3 videos. And so down here in this section, I've created that rectangle. And so I'm going to try to do the same thing for the second video. First, I'm going to try it with pink to see what happens if I take that same magenta color, that's the dots, and make that the background, and see what that does over time. And then after that, I'm going to try the same thing with the cyan, because I'm interested in if I'm going to be able to sort of highlight the lines versus highlight the points and what that will look like in comparison to the top one. And then I want to do the same thing with the last one, but that one I think I just want to do like a grayscale to see if I can't get it to fade so that I'm only seeing those words basically floating in space, similar to what I'm doing in the top. All right. So it's when this starts, it will revert back to the home page, and I'll have to re-navigate. But I'm going to just start working. But if there are any questions as I start to do this, I have an eye on the chat, and I can answer any questions y'all might have. Now all I just did there was I made it so that it wouldn't keep blinking and that I have to constantly refresh. So I'll refresh it after I do this here. So all I'm doing is basically making a new item that does the same thing, but I want to change the color. So before I do that, I just want to make sure that basically everything that I am doing is actually functioning. So before I even change the color, I'm just going to go in and see if I can't tell if this is working. Cool, so it's working. So now what I'm going to do is change this color. And so I know that this color is basically a magenta, but I have like a color picker thing that I often use, which allows me to like go in and just double check and see a color. So I can take and grab this and change my color. So now it's basically functioning in the same way that the other one is. We can see that like just that cyan color is populating to the front. So I'm really interested in this, but one of the things that is always a bit frustrating or a bit hard to work with as a trans person is like this idea that there is like a binary, right? And so kind of ironically, this system, as I'm working with this, there's like a blue and a pink, and then there would be a gray at the bottom. So I'm like uninterested in creating that sort of trans flag or like kind of binary thing. So in that way, while I'm kind of interested in the way this cyan looked, I'm actually going to switch it now and do the cyan and see if I can't get the cyan to be the background and the pink dots to sort of float to the surface, and see if that how that looks and if that looks different. So I've got 0, 255, 255. Yeah, so already I'm more interested in the way this color combination is working. Although I am also noticing that unlike the top one, the bottom, like the fade is a lot more prevalent. And so this last number over here is the opacity, or like how quickly you know that trail is going to get covered up. And so unlike the top one, I think I want to make this one like fade a little bit faster, just to see if I can't get it to be slightly more clear where the dots are. Yeah, so this is just even a slight bit different, but I think that it's a little bit more easy. It's a little easier to see that reference point and to see what it's doing. So with that one done, I'm going to go to the bottom and do the same thing, but for the bottom, I just want to do like a grayscale to see if I can't get to fade, so I'm just seeing those texts and having those float in this same sort of way. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I'm just going to go ahead and paste the same thing and then change my variables. This is all basically making it shift from looking at canvas 2, which is the second canvas, to canvas 3, which is this third one. And then I know that like a middle gray, something like 127 for each of these. So I know what happened here is I didn't change my variable over here. So now I'm getting this weird kind of like muddled gray on the top. So I need to change these. These are all pretty much working the way that I was hoping that they would work now. I'm noticing, however, that the bottom one, like that dark rectangle, is still really clear. And so I'm going to go with a slightly darker gray to see if I can't knock that back so I get more of that floating image the way that I have in the other two. And I went in the wrong direction, so I actually have to go more like... So what this last number is controlling, again, is like the alpha. So it's kind of hard with the gray, especially because you have to sort of wait to see what that end result is, because basically what's happening is every 1 second it's populating a new bit of data, and it's putting the same amount of opaque gray on top, and so it takes a little bit to figure out that color match. And I could go in and try to do like a more accurate kind of numerical analysis to see exactly what's going on. But again, as I'm approaching this more from a visual standpoint, I really kind of enjoy this push and pull of being able to go in, look at something, and respond visually to how it's actually how it's actually generating in real time. So this is closer, but it's still like not quite there. So I'm going to try to knock it down even just a little bit further. And also have this one be a little bit more opaque as well. So you can see how it tracks and delays over time. The gray is tricky, so it's even still. So I'm going to push it down even further and see if I can't get it closer. Yeah, so that's like much closer to what I was interested in. And so now we get this slow fade from a moment where basically you can see my face to it slowly fading to it's still doing the facial recognition process, but now that process is sort of removed from its original visual referent, even if we're still able to see the ghosts of that process. So one of the things that's happening here is that the facial recognition is going off every 1 second. And basically what that means is that, you know, we get this sort of choppy, almost flip book kind of motion, and that's contrasted from the motion of my face, which we of course can see a lot easier. And I'm kind of interested in that because what the code does is basically it runs on a loop, and that loop is infinite. And I think that anything that can kind of show that loop or show that that process of over and over again and make it seem a little bit less streamlined is something I'm visually really interested in. So I'm actually going to experiment and see if making it even slower, like what that looks like. And so my interval is down here, and right now it's at about a second. So I'm going to bump that up by half. One thing that's going to happen when I do that is that the interval that the whole thing resets means that it might not be quite as opaque. We might not get all of get to that floating data sort of visual because it's populating more slowly. There is also a part of this that is really nice, is that it also means that by making this kind of more clunky, more chugging way of visualizing, the practical side of that is that it also allows for folks with slower computers to also engage with it, because these scripts are taking up energy on your own computer. So even if you know, it's available to you, it might run slowly. So the idea that I'm purposefully making it slower also makes it, you know, hardware-wise more accessible to a larger group of people. So I actually really do like it being like a little bit slower, but I want the data version of this to linger longer. And so I have another interval down here, and this whole thing is controlling the wiping and the resetting. So first I want to kind of note that this is for the reset, because I hadn't done that for myself, and make a note. And then I'm going to change this, and I'm actually just going to go up by 50%, and then reset again. So this is kind of like the core visual element, and now what my plan to do next is to think about text that I've already written and writing new text in relation to these visual elements to see what transpires. And then as I add more text, replacing the test 1 and test 2 and maybe text in between with more items, that might also then inform changes to the visual itself. But what I'm interested in here is sort of isolating these different things. So like, you know, what is that number? The number on the top, that floating number in the bright blue, is the percentage of confidence it has that what it's showing you is a face. So it's 96% sure that I have a face right now. But if I tilt my head up, we can see it goes down. Or if you go to the side, it starts to lose some of its surety or lose it altogether. See, it popped out. And then what the one in the middle is doing is it's putting on facial landmarks. And landmarks are of course, that whole idea is the title of the work. And I'm interested in what makes a point of our face a landmark, and how can we highlight that and change that. And then the bottom is, of course, extrapolating those things into an even more complex determination of what is the emotion of the person. So we go from perhaps the most basic, is this or isn't this a face, to what's the shape of this face, to what's the nature or what's the emotion of this face. And these operations are, all very opaque in terms of how they're being understood and how they're being made. And so I'm really interested in how can I take these visuals, add text to it, and create a sort of poetic interaction between the viewer and their own face as it's being read and the text, so that they can think about ways that we might interrupt or think differently about these technologies and what they're doing. So this is basically all I had planned in terms of the live code for today, but if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm just going to go ahead and edit a couple more things on here just to change it up a little bit, and then I will probably close out in the next couple minutes. Yeah, so all I did was change the text so that it was centered. I'm also realizing now that the triptych on the top should probably be a header tag, so I might have to change that, and then added some more spacing. I'm also interested how this might look if the spacing was like right on top of one another, so I'm going to try that too. So I kind of like it this way too, with them touching. You know, from a visual standpoint, it's this idea of like, are these separate processes, or are they connected processes? And by making them touching, does that sort of help us understand the relationship they have to one another, and what's the the sort of visual poetics that go into this. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to sharing more with you next time. I'll probably have another page and another composition to show. Have a great day.